Talking Louisville football here at MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, and a great turnaround, of course, headed up by Scott Satterfield coming in from App State from 2-10, and the mess that Bobby Petrino left to an 8-5 final record last season. We got AIUCard on the line, Cardinal Craze. How are we doing today?
Doing all right. Just enjoying this nice indoor weather. Just nice AC temperature. How you doing today?
Doing well. Appreciate you jumping on here.
Yeah.
Scott Satterfield obviously made his mark. Why do you think he was so successful in getting this thing turned around as quickly as he did?
Well, one of the things is he was the buy-in was a lot shorter than what people expected because he was able to bring fun back to the program. He was able to bring a sense of trust, and building that trust took a while. And I think one of the things, the biggest turnaround, because the team that Bobby Petrino left him with was, the same kids who went 2-10. And Scott Satterfield was able to turn them around, show them that, he had compassion, and just be able for them to be able to put his trust in them. And one key part that we kind of found out later was Bobby Petrino had a very strict kind of, if you mess it up once, then, the next time you mess it up, don't expect to be starting. Kind of that high expectation for all the recruits. And, most college coaches do have high expectations. They don't want to lowball the expectations for any type of kid or recruit. And, Scott Satterfield went in and said, okay, we're going to work on fundamentals, because that was one of the biggest things that they needed to do, was start off with redoing fundamentals and understanding what they had to do position-wise, and just kind of incorporating their scheme and bringing their family-oriented style to Louisville, which hadn't been seen in a long time.
Mikhail Cunningham's a kid at quarterback that not a whole lot of people knew about entering 2019. He turned in quite the season, 2,000 yards passing, 22 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions. You got to be happy with his progression, but maybe some still room to grow here in 2020.
Oh, yeah, definitely. There's always room to grow no matter what sport you're in. But Mikhail Cunningham did have a great season. And honestly, if Juwan Pass hadn't been injured in, I believe it was the first game, we may have seen Juwan in there. But Scott Satterfield was kind of switching them out between Evan Conley and Mikhail Cunningham at quarterback throughout the season. He kind of was trying to utilize on both and be able to relieve pressure off of Mikhail. One of the interesting things is that he changed the way he wanted to be introduced as, because he originally was called Malik Cunningham. And at some point, he told everyone that his first name was Mikhail and his middle name was Malik. And so he wanted to kind of, I think it was his 21st birthday, and he said he wanted to, he was kind of like a new era situation. He wanted to be called Mikhail because I think he felt like he had earned it, and he wanted people to start taking him, or maybe, just calling him, I can't remember exactly why. I think maybe he wanted people to see him a little differently. And that's why he went back to going by his first name. But overall, we have some dynamic players coming back. Mikhail Cunningham comes back, I believe, for his junior year. And the true freshman, Evan Conley, who played as backup, comes in for his sophomore year. So, there's a lot of exciting things happening on quarterback this season.
Javian Hawkins turned in one of the great seasons of any freshman running back in the country, 1,500 yards, 9 touchdowns, caught 4 passes out of the backfield. Was he expected to be this type of impact player coming into the system?
I don't think he expected to have 1,500 rushing yards in one season alone. And for the most part, I think the original starter from Bobby Petrino era was Hassan Hall. And I guess at some point, Javian Hawkins just stepped up to the plate and started making a lot more different dynamic plays and was able to. I mean, he's a fast, strong running back we have, and honestly, I don't know if anyone really expected this past season to go how it went. To be quite honest, a lot of people. After the 2-10 season that Bobby Petrino left, we really thought there was going to be a 3-4 year rebuild situation in front of us. But Mikhail Cunningham, Mikhail Cunningham and Javion Hawkins, both really exceeded expectations by tenfold, honestly. But yes, Javion Hawkins, I believe, is gearing up for another great season and potentially over 2,000 rushing yards, I truly believe.
You lose two starting offensive linemen, including Mekhi Becton, who we're going to hear his name called early in the NFL draft as probably the first tackle taken. So the offense exploded last year under Scott Satterfield. Mm-hmm. The defense still has quite a bit of work to do. Gave up a ton of points in various games against the likes of Boston College, of course, Wake Forest 62-59, blasted at Miami 52-27. So obviously there's much to do there. Kentucky scored 45 points as well. Your outlook on the defensive improvement for 2020?
Defensively, I believe it'll improve because one of the things that a lot of people oversee is the fact that we have a brand new, this will be second year for a bunch of defensive coaches. Coach Brian Brown, who is the defensive coordinator and, the head coach for the defense, he, this will be his second year. Now, mind you, yes, there were some times this past season where we saw a lot of what we saw under Bobby Petrino on defense. There were a lot of missed tackles. There was a lot of, mind you, it wasn't as bad as the 2018 season. But honestly, there's been a ton of improvement, and there are some key guys coming in who will obviously be able to step up to the plate, especially on defense. We have some freshmen who are going to be crucial in this new season. And one of the key things that Louisville does have some issue at is still depth. One of the reasons why this past year was so bad was because there's just not a lot of depth. Bobby Petrino, unfortunately, his staff did not have quite as much depth as Scott Satterfield had essentially wanted going into the program. We've actually had a lot of walk-ons come on, and they've actually been there's been a couple that have been starters and gotten some scholarships. But for the most part, there are some key people on defense who are coming in as JUCOs who I believe are going to immediately make some impacts. And we have a lot of returning production as well. I think we were one of the top highest returning productions in the country. We had about 75 to 78% returning production. And I think that's going to be crucial, especially if you look at the second year impact that coaches can have. Under Louisville prior to Scott Satterfield era, we had 4 defensive coordinators with 4, all the different safety coaches, linebacker coaches, and defensive back coaches coming in almost every year for 4 years. And so now finally, for the first time, we're having coaches return for their second year. And I think defense will be crucial. But I expect to see a big improvement all across the board. We got kids like Marvin Dallas coming in, who's an outside linebacker. We got Yaya, if I don't want to pronounce his name wrong. I think it's Dobbs.
You'll know him once he gets on campus, gets on the roster, starts playing. You'll get his name down. But at this point, it's a guessing game.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely. Now, some people we are having return who are going to make big steps are Jared Goldwire, CJ Avery, Dorian Etheridge, Dorian Jones coming in, who's a redshirt freshman. I believe that he's going to make some big impacts once. I think he's currently nursing an injury. We have people like Robert Hicks, who's a 4-star recruit from Miami coming in, who's a inside linebacker, and Monty Montgomery, who I believe was a JUCO kid last year. who came into the program. But you know, a lot of these issues that we saw in 2018 started to become a little bit cleaned up and better in 2019. Now, yes, UK getting blown out by them in Miami. You know, Miami did not. Miami showed signs throughout their season about being a good team. And there were some times that Manny Diaz, you know, it seemed almost like he was dropping the ball, you know, and they recently had a coaching staff change, I believe. So one of the main things that I'm going to look at this year is improvement all across the board. It may be 30% improvement, it may be 50% improvement, but there's still a high expectation that, you know, second-year coaches coming in will be able to help these guys, especially when it comes to fundamentals, you know, knowing the scheme, especially knowing the scheme. You know, going into your first year with the new head coach, you know, you're still learning the scheme as the season goes along, you know. And you know, a lot of the veterans are going to be able to actually help some of the recruits coming in and be able to tell them what is expected to do, instead of the coaches having to go, this is what you're doing, this is what you're doing wrong. You know, now they can start working on some of those key plays, and I don't know what else. There's a word for it. But anyways, for the most part, yes, I expect a huge turnaround on defense.
And you also have a couple prospects coming in that have committed here in the last week. Of course, recruiting quite the challenge for coaches across the country in this pandemic world. Texting, FaceTime, also coming into play more than ever. But a couple prospects that are some decent grades on a couple guys that just committed in the last week.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I believe we had a transfer come in from UConn. I think it was an outside tackle. And let me just pull that up. Yeah, Cam DeGeorge. He was 6'6", 255. And, you know, and we've had a couple others. Now, you'd mentioned one other come into the program. Or, well, it was currently he's our only transfer coming into the program from the 2020 class. But for the most part, I can see a lot of these kids who are coming in. You know, we had about 13 kids who graduated early and were actually able to enroll in January. That's one of the highest, I think Scott Satterfield said he has ever had, is 13 kids coming in January. You know, a lot of them come in the summer or in the fall, whenever they're, you know, done with school or having some just having you know, some academic situations that they had to clear up before they could enroll. But yeah, for the most part, it's looking very good. But for the most part, you know, we have recruited 3 JUCOs out of the Georgia Military College, and the guy's name was Yaya Dabi, I believe that's how you pronounce it. And we've had a we've had an offensive tackle come in, Trevor Reed, who I think is going to be explosive and you know, be able to kind of fill where Mekhi Becton has kind of left. Now, one other who Mekhi actually has been highly praising is Adonis Boone, who actually played in the Mississippi State bowl game. Well, the Music City Bowl game against Mississippi State, and he did a phenomenal job. One of the people I think on offense who's going to do an exceptional job as well is Renato Brown. And there's been photos of him from this earlier spring when they were doing the training camp, and he's put on a lot of weight, a lot of muscle, and I think, honestly, he's going to be one of the starters on guard. But outside of that, you know, it's going to be kind of a question. You know, we're still too early to even really determine who's going to be the starter, who's not. One of the key things I will say that Louisville has some concern at is corner. We lost a corner to the transfer portal. I think it was I can't remember his name. But for the most part, you know, we do have a freshman coming in who I truly believe is going to be a starter, and he is an exceptional player. His name is Marquis Lowry, And I've actually he sent me some footage of him during spring practice, and he is fast, strong, and can read the play very well. And honestly, I expect big things from him coming up and potentially being a true freshman.
Okay, Marquis Lowry, according to the 247 composite, number 138 corner, top 50 player out of North Carolina, out of Charlotte. Very good. So if we've got a complete college football season, and of course that if is enormous right now, it all begins for Louisville on a Thursday night, September 3rd, against North Carolina State. Unusual schedule with Notre Dame and Kentucky finishing up. Of course, the game against the Wildcats is always the final game of the season, but with 2 non-conference games to conclude 2020, and again an in-division game against a down North Carolina State team from 2019 to kick things off. We've gotten our Louisville football update here from Cardinal Craze. We appreciate you stopping by and giving us the lowdown on Scott Satterfield's workings there at Louisville.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on, Mark.